Hey everybody, I want to talk about Christian worship music and what do you do? What do you do if you leave Christianity to become somewhat Jewish or more Jewish in your fundamental theology, which I think a lot of people are moving towards with the Hebrew roots movement and the Messianic Jewish movement. It's becoming ever more popular to leave typical Christendom and become quite a bit more Jewish, and theologically speaking, and in other ways as well, even to the point of some degree of Torah observance, biblical Torah observance. I don't think they use the Mishnah Torah too much, but or the Talmud. But the Messianic Jews, they're kind of moving away from traditional Christianity more towards what things were like in the first century before Pauline theology completely took over. Um, you know, so what do you do with that worship music? If are you supposed to completely ditch all Christian worship music if you become more Jewish in your theology and your thinking? Well, it's possible because there obviously even the Messianics realize there's a lot of heresy going on in the mainstream Christendom and mainstream Protestantism, and they recognize some of it. They even to the point of even recognizing that the Apostle Paul is a complete heretic and that the Trinity is complete nonsense of a doctrine. They realize that stuff. That's a good start. If you realize stuff to that degree, not just like, oh, these feast days aren't quite right, or Christmas and Easter are pagan holidays, that's not a big deal. Come on, the Trinity and Pauline theology, to reject that stuff, that's way bigger. If you got to that degree, you definitely want to be careful what kind of worship music you ever listened to or played in your congregation, like in the church. Would you want to play any kind of worship music that reflected Pauline theology from the letters of Paul? Would you want to do that? No. And if you have music that from the past that reflects Pauline theology, or reflects the Trinity doctrine, you want to probably delete that stuff and start over from scratch. Don't keep it because you think, well, some of it is good. That's not really wise. A little leaven does leaven the whole lot, so you don't want to keep. So if you can't remove that leaven from the video, just get rid of the video completely, or whatever music it is, or stuff like that. Because it is really a progression. I can see it happening in the future where more and more Christians, quite possibly, are moving more away from traditional Christianity towards something more Hebraic. Where you have like some of the more traditional feast days being kept. Although here's the problem with that, though. It's another for another poster, but it's like you're not Jewish. You're not literally Hebrew, so it's like, why are you worried about these feast days? But anyway, but if you're moving away from typical Christianity more towards Hebrew religion, more towards ancient Hebrew practices, like ditch all the music that generally you held to in the first place, except for like what can I say? I listen to some Christian music. I'm much more Jewish in my core theology at this point than Christian. I still have some Christian elements in me, what I were to perceive as truth, but it's like it's really hard for me to listen to a lot of Christian worship music, because it's like bam, I keep like, hitting my head on this stuff. I say, dang it, they just had to mention the name JC. They just had to say that at the wrong time in the wrong way. You know what I mean? Making him sound like he was a god or something, or some kind of demigod. So it's really hard to listen to a lot of Christian stuff, and then they have to mention all this other stuff that's nonsense. And if you ever left Christianity to become fully Jewish, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you probably miss the worship because it's very nice. They have some very nice music. It's very professionally done a lot of the time. It's like, well, what are you supposed to do? For them, for the people, for the songwriters, I would say delete all your stuff off the internet that you have, just to be respectful, and start over. For people who like to listen to stuff that's already out there, what do I say? Well, maybe, just be careful and be cautious. Don't just ingest anything that's out there. Listen, check out what the lyrics to the song are first and think for yourself. Does this make sense? Is this theologically sound? And where is this leading to? Like some churches have a whole theological bent to them and an agenda, like to lead you down to the path to destruction. Well, that'd be most of them. But so you want to be careful with what you get sucked into, and you don't want to get sucked into a certain system of theology because, well, the music sounded really good and it drew you in that way emotionally. So just be very careful with, this should be obvious stuff, a lot of what I'm saying, but Christian worship music that appeals to Jews or or otherwise like that, it's like, well, okay, there were warnings, the rabbis have given warnings in the past, don't get sucked into Christian worship, don't listen to the beautiful hymns of their songs, don't listen, they always warned, or they had traditionally warned a lot of fellow Jews, the rabbis did, don't get sucked into their beautiful music. And I remember reading that somewhere. But yeah, the rabbis did warn their fellow Jews about not getting sucked into it because of the music. So that's a danger, getting sucked into a certain system of theology just because the music appeals to you. That's not a smart way to go about things. So these are some considerations when it comes to what's the deal is with Christian worship music if you're leaving mainstream Christianity behind. Obviously, I would strongly suggest doing that if you haven't already decided to leave Trinitarian theology and Pauline theology behind. I would strongly recommend investigating these things and whether the claims of the Trinity and the claims of the letters of Paul actually make any sense. You'd probably find that they don't at the end of the day. So that's a good thing to move away from. That's a huge move in the right direction. But be careful with this Christian worship music, which you might be attached to in your heart, to a lot of these songs. They might have affected you emotionally at different times in your life, and you felt like it really changed you, and they might actually have to some extent. Who knows? God works in mysterious ways, right? So, but you got to be really careful that, you don't just listen to one song and then you go to the next one and it's going into heresy and you recognize it. And, even mainstream Christians, fundamental evangelical Protestants would have recognized the truth of what I'm saying, and they often bicker and fight amongst themselves concerning the same thing. You know, so yeah, no, worship is really good. I wish there was more really beautiful Jewish worship out there that was, just entirely Old Testament stuff. Very just basic. Maybe not so basic, but I really wish it was out there. But so far, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot. It's the Christian music kind of dominates the American landscape for the most part, it being pretty much a Protestant-founded nation. So this is a tough. I myself play worship music and I sing worship and I play various instruments. And I obviously have an attachment that is emotional to many of these different Christian songs from my past, having been involved in the church system for many years. As a Christian, a generally charismatic Christian. So it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Ditch all the songs? But not necessarily. Just think about them. Can you make the lyrics work at the end of the day? Like, can you make the lyrics work? Do you have to start changing words around? And when you have to do that, it's kind of like, yeah, are you almost better off writing a new song completely and making up something new? As opposed to trying to reuse this stuff that's contaminated with leaven, and it, and that the spirit behind that song when they wrote it is probably abominable in many cases. I mean, even mainstream Christians recognize the truth of what I'd be saying here, even though they might differ in their doctrines between me and them, but, they recognize what I'm talking about. So anyway, I think this is some practical advice, and it's not, like, incredibly complex, at least not at this point. But be very careful with worship music that you do not get sucked into a cult or to some strange, foreign, alien theology just because the music appeals to your emotions. I mean, if anything, the devil, the enemy wants to, Satan wants to draw you in and lure you in through your emotions, not through anything logical. I don't think of Satan as somebody or something that is logical and rational so much. The enemy is not logical and rational. They hate that because it testifies against everything they wish they could have and do. So you're not going to find that. So if you start moving away from logic and reason into an emotional only territory, I would take heed at that point and maybe put your foot down and say no more. You need to be able to make sense of what you're doing, and the worship lyrics need to make sense with the theology that you already hold to in your heart. That needs to kind of line up. Anyway, think about these couple of things, and you guys have a good day.